Hello everyone, and good morning. I am Amy Loudermilk, the program manager for Arts Build. I'm pleased to welcome you all today on behalf of Arts Build and Arts Forward in partnership to provide opportunities to educate and to encourage Hamilton County's arts sector to vote. We are here today to talk about the issues and the topics with our city mayoral candidates. And these topics are the ones that matter most to Chattanooga and our local arts sector. And we're also here to advocate for arts funding and resources in our area. Today, I am grateful that Lon Cartwright made time to join us and share his plans as a mayoral candidate for the city of Chattanooga. In regards to the organization I represent, Arts Build, our mission is building community through the arts. We do that by funding local arts organizations and arts projects. We are an advocate for the arts, a convener, and an arts hub for Hamilton County. Currently, Arts Build is engaged in its Rural Arts Challenge, as well as Tech Goes Home for the arts community. We are also looking forward to announcing our request for applications for our next Holmberg Arts Leadership Institute cohort. Now it is my pleasure to introduce my very good friend and coordinator of today's chat, Monica Kinsey, who is representing Arts Forward. We are very thankful for Monica in organizing these talks with our local candidates, because getting to know our mayoral candidates is integral to the Greater Chattanooga and the Hamilton County arts sector and our community at large. So we truly have a gift in these chats. So Monica, let's get started.
Thank you so much, Amy. Like Amy said, I am Monica Kinsey, and I represent Arts Forward Chattanooga, which is a collective of 18 arts organizations. We work alongside Arts Build on sourcing shared services such as HR, legal, marketing, awareness of the arts in the community, as well as advocacy of the arts in our community. The arts contribute over $172 million to our local economy, and we feel that it's important for our arts communities to engage in their local elections. Simply put, artists create, they contribute, and they vote. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest mayoral candidate today, Mr. Lon Cartwright, and our moderator, Woodson Carpenter of Rise Chattanooga. I will let each of our guests share a little more about themselves and their organizations as we kick this off. Woodson, let's start with you.
Excellent. Thank you for the introduction. I'm glad to be on this morning with everyone and talk a little bit about arts in Chattanooga and kind of what we hope is a bright future going forward with creativity and our city at large. Like Monica said, my name is Woodson Carpenter. I'm currently the community arts strategist at Rise Chattanooga. If you're unfamiliar with Rise Chattanooga, we are an arts and cultural organization that operate under the pillars of community education, performance, and cultural preservation. So we do everything from an entrepreneurial arts incubator for creatives to music lessons and to everything from coming up now. We have an opportunity coming soon for artists to share their work on identity with their neighbors and the community. So be on the lookout for that. And then in general, I am a kid from Chattanooga originally, so I've kind of been popping all over the place recently. And I'm also an artist myself, so I think this is a particularly interesting conversation because I'm, as an artist, as someone working in this field, and as someone also interested kind of academically in the intersections of art and creativity with policy and with how we shape our cities and grow our cities and help one another. I think it's wonderful for us to be having these conversations with each other conscientiously. So I'm looking forward to talking with you, Monica, and with you, Mr. Cartwright, about how we can do that going forward.
Yes.
So with that being said, we'll go ahead and let Mr. Cartwright introduce himself.
Yes, Woodson. I'm definitely very much in link with the arts. I've drawn. I use the waves as a canvas for my music that I play. I toy with several different instruments: harmonica, recorder, fiddle, keyboards, ukulele. I played a little bit of guitar. I love to sing. I've been an actor before. I was very privileged to do that. I was Principal Harry Clark for the play Footloose in Muncie, Indiana, several years ago. It was my first experience in theater, and I think I learned more from that experience than I would have from any textbook.
Mm.
So I definitely have a love for the arts and would want to support the arts in Chattanooga. I've got a bachelor's degree and master's degree from Western Michigan University. I was a case manager and counselor, and I also worked on the emergency care team. So I've had my feet to the fire. I've gone to accredited schools, and there's a lot of right things about Chattanooga, but there's some things that I find that need to be changed. I think I'm suited for the job. I have no political ties. I'm not a politician, and I have more of the ability to think outside the box than what some of the other candidates would have.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Mr. Cartwright, we it's good to hear that you have so much of a background with arts. I think that's a good start. I have a bunch of questions from the community
Sure.
about what people are thinking about, and kind of questions and potential concerns about what people have been missing out on, or are looking forward to from their potential new mayor. We kind of moving around. Some are broad, some are a little more zoomed in, but they all seem reasonable at the very least. So we'll go ahead and get started here. And you kind of hit this a little bit about your personal background and experience with the arts, but I'm wondering if you could maybe expand a little bit on what has it. You've mentioned you play some instruments, done some acting.
Yes.
I'm sure Footloose was fun to be a part of.
Yes, a
So
lot of
could you
fun.
talk? Excellent, excellent. So could you talk a little bit more about what has that been for you? As an individual, as someone navigating different cities and different environments to have that relationship with art.
Well, that's an uplifting experience. It's helped me grow as an individual, and I think the arts is a great thing, and I think more people need to be involved with the arts. If they were, we probably would see a lot less violence and a lot more cooperation in our society.
Would you mind elaborating on that a little bit?
Well, I think that if you're playing a musical instrument or you're involved in the theater, you have a lot less time to hang out with a wrong element in society. And, you're more apt to hold on to the positive things rather than to look at the negative things.
Okay.
I think it makes you stronger. I think it makes you a better human being.
I think I can definitely agree with that as well. So thinking about that, and thinking about art adding positivity to our lives, making us better humans. How would your administration support, very broadly, and we can get into more particulars, but how would your administration support and engage the arts sector in Chattanooga?
Well, I would carry on like how Mayor Burke did. I think
Okay.
he was pretty good with the arts. He definitely supported the arts, and I think he did a very good job from what I've seen from that. But of course, I haven't. I would know more about that once I would become mayor, and I'd be privy to all of the literature and the particulars of what exactly he did do.
Okay.
But I'm transparent. I'm open. I'm available to talk to art leaders in the community and get feedback and try to come up with the very best program for the arts that I could.
Okay. Do you have any ideas? So I think that's I think the conversation piece is huge, right? It's difficult to know what the community needs without talking to the community about what the community needs. So one of the questions here is, um, what art related policies and programming would you bring to the city? So I'll ask you that, and then maybe I'll flavor it a little bit with, um, as you want to have these conversations with artists and community members,
Mhm.
how do you think you would approach that? Right. So thinking about perhaps building upon the work Mayor Burke has done. Are there any new ideas, new policies, new programs that you would think about implementing that would potentially encourage those conversations, create more of those conversations, encourage people to come talk to you and give you those ideas?
Well, I definitely would be for a meet your city leaders night, perhaps once every 2 or 3 months, where
Okay.
citizens could come in and talk to the mayor one-on-one, talk to the heads of departments in city government to give feedback, to talk about problems,
Mm.
and to offer up suggestions. I think that would build a stronger community, and it would also help to increase trust in government.
Okay. Okay. So that keeping that transparency piece.
Yeah, that would be high on my agenda.
Okay. Okay. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, making sure we know who everybody is, right? Really
Absolutely.
easy for people to get lost in the background, who we've been talking about sometimes. So, moving down these questions, these are a little bit more specific, but not terribly so. And I'll kind of add these together. It seems like you've already answered this question, right? That the local government has a role to play in arts and culture of our city.
Yes.
So could you expand on that a little bit, and maybe begin to speak about this other question? Um, uh, there are a couple of questions about funding. So I'll ask you a broader one. Are you in support of continuing funding for public art and arts organizations in the
Yes,
city budget?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. And could you maybe expand on that a little bit more, about what you think the government's role is, as a funding mechanism or beyond that in supporting arts and culture, and the organizations that do that work?
Well, I want to make city government more equitable.
Okay.
I think taxes, fees, and fines should be income driven. In other
Okay.
words, the more income you have, the more you should contribute toward those things. It's just like I've read the Bible, and in addition, I've read several other books too. But one passage that I've read is that to whom much is given, much will be required. And I think this is true for a city government. I mean, if you're making $300,000 or more, yeah, you should pay more in taxes. You should pay, uh, your fair share of a fine or a fee. Uh, on the other hand, if you're poor, if you're on Social Security or uh, you're making far less in wages, you shouldn't have to pay as much. Uh, and so I don't pretend to be an expert as far as the funding,
Mm.
but I will say that I believe in science and research, and I believe in working across the aisles, with others that don't believe as I do, to try to come up with the best policy for the art community.
Okay. So bouncing off, so you just mentioned that believing in science and research, and I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, some of your academic background. We actually have a question here, that I think hits at that a little bit, and this is something I'm personally really interested as we look at the ways in which art makes us better, right? So someone has asked, and this is a little bit more of a complicated question, so I'll ask the whole thing and then we can split it up too. So someone has asked, what can you tell us about the influence of art on youth who have been in contact with the law? and then ask for examples, and then they follow up with, do you think that art can be instrumental in helping students do better in other classes like science and math? So we can start, let's start with that first part. Do you know anything about the influence of youth who have been in contact with the law? I think you might have mentioned something about that a little earlier.
Well, I think some of my clients I had in the past that had some run-ins with the law. Once they took up art, it seemed like their attention was diverted from doing negative things that would get them in trouble with the law. And just watching the news and different television programs, you often see uplifting stories of people who have been in jail and prison where they have taken up artistic work, became painters or drawers or taken up music. And it was a total turnaround for them, that they left that path of crime. Yeah, that's about all I can say about that.
Okay. That's all. That's quite all right. And so the second part of that question was, or the second question there was, do you think that art can be instrumental in helping students do better in their other classes like science or math or maybe any other subject?
Well, it definitely helped them stay in school. It's just like with athletes. A lot of students would drop out of school if it wasn't for football, playing high school football. And I'm sure that is also true for people in arts, that a good, strong arts program and music program in a high school will keep students in the high school. Okay.
And do you think
kind of makes sense?
For sure.
Yeah.
Do you think there are ways? I'm wondering if this question they mean, do you think there are ways that art and creativity directly help students in their other subject areas, right? So is that so in addition to keeping them in the building, right? Do you think there are ways that engaging with art is sort of directly helping them as they try to tackle their science classes or try to learn their
well, the way for sure. I think that music and arts that helps develop the other side of the brain to become stronger, and that can only help all around for the student to do better, because if you exercise one part, another part, I think, reaps the benefits of that. So it can only be good.
Okay. And I think I would adamantly agree with you there about that. So we'll keep it moving here. People have great questions for you. So these are a little bit more specific. So we might see here perhaps maybe where you differentiate from some of the other candidates. So one of the questions we have is, what role do you think the mayor can play, I think is what they meant here. The mayor can play in helping Chattanooga to become one of America's great music cities, right? So we got Nashville right above us, we got Atlanta right below us, and Memphis to the west. So do you think the mayor has a role in that, and what role do you think
definitely.
the mayor might have in making Chattanooga a great American music city?
Yeah, I would like to see a lot of changes in Chattanooga.
Okay.
Some free parking downtown, especially for our public library. Okay. Many cities, medium-sized cities, do have free parking for their library. Also, I think, and some people maybe could care less about fast food restaurants, but I look at downtown Chattanooga and it's a fast food desert. There's really no fast food restaurants down there. And we have tourists that come to our city, and they don't necessarily want to spend $50 or more to feed their family for lunch. Okay. And we have a lot of low income individuals that live in and near the downtown area, senior citizens. We've got a lot of senior citizen apartments. You know, right now, downtown Chattanooga, we've got two choices mostly for restaurants, high and higher. So I would like to bring a couple of fast food restaurants downtown. Also, we don't have any service stations that are really close to downtown Chattanooga. The closest one I know of is the Cancun on Central Avenue.
Okay.
So I think there's a need there. Also, we need more bus service for our senior citizens and low-income people. For a lot of Chattanoogans, Red Bank, the stores in Red Bank are actually closer for them to go to than what many of the stores are in Chattanooga. And yet there's no bus service to Red Bank, none. So I would like to see more of that. Also, I've noticed that there's not enough bicycle paths in Chattanooga. Some areas of Chattanooga have no sidewalks. And the sidewalks in many areas are in shambles. They are terrible. They're broken. The panels are raised. I was walking out around some senior citizens apartments on Gateway Avenue and Boynton Avenue. Terrible condition. I've heard of horror stories of people falling down, knocking themselves out, and they're laying there, and some of them get very hurt from these sidewalks. There's been a lot of talk about potholes, but the pothole problem, from what I've seen, isn't as bad as the sidewalk problem. Sidewalks are very bad. Many of the traffic lights are not synchronized right. They need to be recalibrated. The one traffic light I'm thinking of right offhand is the one on Gateway Avenue and Martin Luther King. The walk signal stays on for 3 seconds. Then it goes off and you get a red hand up. Now nobody's going to walk across that street 3 seconds. You know, you can't even run across that wide street in 3 seconds. Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that really could change in Chattanooga for the better. It would draw more tourism. It could only help the arts for some of these changes. So that's some of the things I like to do. Also, the COVID-19 is a big problem in Chattanooga. We're still getting 10 to 20% of people refusing to wear a mask. Well, it's the only crime I know of where you could commit murder and get away with it. You know, we have people going into these stores. They'll have a mask on maybe when they go in, after they get in, they take it off. Well, it only takes one of those persons to have COVID-19, coughing out 1,000 COVID-19 bullets out in the air to infect an entire store. And yet our police are not doing anything about it. Many of the store managers are not doing anything about it. We have more than 400,000 deaths, close to 410,000 now, United States, within like a 10-month period. We're on a trajectory to having more deaths from this virus than the 1918 flu pandemic. 1918 flu pandemic, we had 650,000 dead. We're at 410,000 now within a 10-month period. If we stay on this path, we're easily going to achieve 650,000 maybe in 6 months from now, maybe. And so, I mean, it's the problem that's considered way too lightly. We need to do something about it.
Monica, did you? Okay.
Yes, I was going to ask if I could interject for one moment. I just had a question to something you referenced earlier, Mr. Cartwright, is that, I'm in agreement with you in regards to we have to rein in COVID-19 because it's affecting our community greatly, but we have to figure out a way to, for the community to realize that they need to be part of the solution, and how it's
Yes,
in their community. So it's definitely a challenge, and we definitely look to our city leaders to help us in doing this. But there are struggles when, the county is over our health department and our mandates, and our city is trying to manage them, and also to cooperate and help with this. And so since you are running for city mayor, it'd be interesting to see how you would work with that relationship. But also, I wanted to touch on what you spoke earlier about the fast food deserts, because I think what you're trying to say is you think we need more affordable, healthy food, correct, in our areas, because a lot of times fast food is not necessarily healthy food, even though it's a cheaper option. So I think we need to find, and correct me where I'm wrong, I just want to make sure that we're understanding you, and your points here. But I feel like you're saying that we need to find options that are more affordable for downtown and for these neighborhoods, for healthy food. Is that right? Or
well, preferably healthy, but I think we have a sort of like a free agency that you have a choice to choose. Now, your choice might not be a choice that somebody else would favor, but I think you should have the right to that choice. Now, myself, I eat healthy as much as I can, but every so once in a while, hey, I might want to have a double cheeseburger. Not very often, but sometimes. And I don't always want to pay $3 for a cup of coffee. Myself, I would rather sometimes stop at McDonald's and get a 65-cent cup of coffee. And I mean, if I feel that way, I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that feel that way too. Well, you go into a restaurant now. I've gone to fine dining restaurants, and that's good. That's all fine. And there's a lot of good restaurants down in downtown Chattanooga. But I think we need more of a ability to choose, more of a choice for people downtown in Chattanooga.
okay, thank you.
Excellent. So I want to go back to something you mentioned before, this idea of equity in Chattanooga, and kind of shift gears a little bit. We have several questions here that are concerned with equitable representation, equitable development, and all of these things as they relate to arts and culture. So the first one I'll give you here is, we know that as we look at the sort of history of the United States, and Chattanooga as a part of that history as well, equity has long been a large concern among artists, among institutions that promote art, present art. So in particular, Black art and Black artists have long been sort of kind of left out of many conversations, especially when we're talking about fine art, museum art, as it were, and even performance art. So one of these questions is that, thinking about Chattanooga's art, and public art in particular, as mayor, what would you do to ensure that there is equity in major public art acquisitions? So in other words, how would you ensure that the city is cognizant of those potential failures, and would support and represent local Black artists?
Well, I think it needs to be in the communication that
Okay.
all art is open to being shown, that we don't leave anybody out. Okay. Art has no color. Art is art. And it doesn't matter if you're Black, you're brown, you're white, you're purple, you're green, or whatever. You have a right to present your art, and it should be viewed.
And so what would you to follow up on that? And I agree that if you're making it matters, right? So what would you say to the person that says, I believe that, but I've been here for a long time and I've never really felt, I hear what you're saying, but I've never really felt like my art was welcome in certain spaces, or I hear what you're saying, but I don't, and I believe you, but I don't see anybody like
Uh-huh.
me presenting art. I don't see anybody like me in museum. How would you have a conversation with,
Well,
say like a local Black artist who just feels like, that's great, but how can I believe that that's true, or what's the follow up going to be?
well, you're penalized if you're discriminatory in housing. Why should art be any different, or music, or anything? If you're kept out of it, of an art show because of the color of your skin, that's a violation, and that needs to be checked. And if I'm mayor, I would be looking into passing some kind of legislation, or bringing about legislation to prevent that.
Okay. So related to that, and I close, but not quite the same. Um, in Chattanooga in particular, and a lot of cities like Chattanooga, and I think this goes back to the representation piece, particularly for people of color. Gentrification is an issue, and it's something that's close to my heart as a person that's interested in cities and in policy, right? This kind of dark shadow that kind of continues to exist over development or beautification efforts, or whatever language folks like to use. And so someone is speaking to this idea of the way that gentrification affects Black communities in particular. So when we think about art and culture, and its relationship to maintaining communities and providing links between generations and cultural narratives and ideas. How would you ensure that the culture of the Black community is preserved as we see the community continue to change, as we see folks pushed out of their communities, out of their neighborhoods? What would you do as mayor to ensure that we can maintain these linkages and preserve the sort of rich cultural history, particularly the rich Black cultural history in Chattanooga?
By communicating about it, getting the word out there, putting flyers out, talking about it on the news, on the radio and television, and working in liaisons with leaders in the art community
Okay.
and
So,
others.
okay. And could you expand on that a little bit more about, what would be the goals of those communications and those conversations for you?
Well, that all art should be readily available to be distributed and shown to the public without
Okay.
reserve, as far as race or religion or creed or any of that stuff.
Okay. Um, so I think this is again flowing in that same conversation. I think this is necessarily kind of attached to gentrification, and particularly how Black folks are part of the sort of cultural and economic story of any city, and Chattanooga as well. But there's this idea of the creative economy, and the role that arts and culture play in the sort of economic backbone of a particular
Mhm.
place. So I think this hits a bunch of issues. I think this is a question of equity. I think it's a question of policy, of economics, of inclusion. Um, but how do you, when you look at Chattanooga, and I know you've mentioned you think a lot of things are right, and you think there's a lot of things that change. So how do you think that the arts sector, those folks that contribute to the creative economy, how can these folks and their work be leveraged to spur economic growth more widely for the city?
Well, by putting on more shows, I think
Okay.
that would be a big step, and just
Okay.
getting the word out there.
Okay. So what do you think? What do you think when you say putting out more shows, do you think it's an issue of numbers? We don't have enough people, local folks. We don't have enough people coming in. What do you mean by that?
Well, for instance, when I lived in South Bend, Indiana, they
Mhm.
would showcase artwork from students,
Okay.
middle schools and high schools. I haven't seen a whole lot of that in Chattanooga,
Okay.
to be frank. I'd like to see more of that.
Okay.
students' arts on display.
Okay. And so more shows, more communication. Again, kind of this communication piece. Do you mean communication between neighbors in Chattanooga? Do you mean communication kind of outside of Chattanooga, like trying to draw folks in? Could you expand on that a little bit as well?
Well, communication with flyers being put out, more in the way of newspaper advertising, radio and TV advertising, that sort of thing.
Okay. So I think it's interesting to think about the advertising piece, the having more performances, and also thinking about Chattanooga has become a little famous, maybe baby famous. I don't know where it falls in the sort of spectrum of fame, but for this sort of growing technology base, right? So do you have any ideas about how art can meet technology, both in that communication and we see COVID still kind of creating an environment where artists are struggling a lot, right? So there's been a lot of live stream performances. People are trying to find ways to do art, to show their work, but not actually be in contact with folks. So do you have any ideas about as we think about economic growth, as we think about drawing people into the city, how we can marry technology with arts and culture to grow our economy and to be able to promote our local work?
Well, I probably won't know a whole lot about that until I'm actually in the office and I'm more privy to what has happened in the past.
Okay.
And of course, I will need to also be in liaisons with others in the community, maybe previous mayors or other folks that have held that office, and pick their brains too as to what they did and how they did it, and talk with artists they're already in the field and directors, and get ideas from them on how they think the city needs to do to be able to bring art more in the forefront of Chattanooga, to build it up, to get artist work looked at, and to grow art in Chattanooga. I hope that kind of helps.
Yeah, so I mean, I think and let me know if I understand you correctly, bringing folks alongside you that might have um, a lot of other ideas that you could
right.
work with folks on.
I don't pretend to know all the answers. I don't.
Sure.
But the good thing about it is I'm honest, and I'm going to say that there's folks out there who would never say that, so I'm, a favorite saying of mine is, "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape." And that's the kind of people we need in government, So I am flexible, and I'm willing to, listen to other people, and it's just like as one, what is it? One knife sharpens another. One individual can sharpen another. Well, I am open to being sharpened, and I hope that somehow my communication with other people will help them.
Excellent. So changing gears a little bit, I've noticed we have a couple of questions in this area. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump over here. We have a couple of questions about rec centers and youth and family development. So I know there's been a lot of conversations for years. I remember when I was a kid, and some folks might still see me as a kid. That's quite all right. But conversations about what's happening and what's not happening in our rec centers. And more recently, I've heard a lot of conversations from folks about the arts and rec centers, right? So we have a couple questions related to these things. I think I'll ask this broader question, and then we'll zoom in on a more specific question. But this first one is, what role, if any, do you see the city of Chattanooga's youth and family development playing in regards to art programs for youth?
Well, I think the youth and family development programs could implement art, and I would highly recommend they do that. Uh, I
And
don't know the specifics of what's actually done right now with COVID going on. I'm sure there's not as much as there normally would be. Seems like COVID has really modified everything, unfortunately.
do you have ideas about what you would like to see in the future? So say, as we imagine, what, hopefully one day a COVID-less, COVID-less world, what you would like
Yes.
to see that role be of youth and family development, and maybe, as they come alongside schools or other educators, whether they be, um,
Yes,
arts educators or otherwise.
yes, all the above. I think that would be a good thing.
Okay.
The more people involved, it can only be good.
Okay.
We need to get the word out there.
Okay. So more specifically, and still in that same realm, specifically thinking about recreation centers, how do you think the arts can have a stronger presence within the recreation center? So do you have any specific ideas about the types of
maybe,
programs or?
yeah,
Sure, go ahead.
maybe some instruction programs could go
Okay.
on within recreation centers.
Okay.
Seemed like I recall the YMCA used to do something like that. It would have art available.
Okay.
And yeah, that would be a good thing for them to
Okay.
offer art classes, maybe a drawing 101 or painting 101 or what have you,
Okay.
for students to be able to learn and appreciate the arts.
And do you think, as mayor, would you think about creating policy around that? Or, you mentioned, a couple of times about opening lines of communication. Do you think that's more of a communications issue, or do you think that's more of a policy issue for you as potential mayor?
Well, I would have to look at what Mayor Burke has done
Okay.
and, take it from there.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to say one thing and then find out, well, no, he's tried that, it didn't work.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So this is there's a couple that kind of pop up in and around here, and I think this is not unrelated, but we're going back to the public art piece. And I know a lot of communities have kind of a complicated history with public art, and we've talked about issues in equity. So I wanted to sort of jump back out to kind of more 10,000 foot view of things and ask you, one of these is sort of what broadly do you envision for Chattanooga's public art office? And so I think that's kind of broad. So I'll ask you kind of, what would be your hopes for that office, and kind of at a base level, what do you think ultimately is the role of a public art office in a city?
Well, I think the role of public art is to enhance creativity, thought in the minds of the citizens. And I'd like to see more art venues as free.
Okay.
There's a lot of people would love to attend some art gatherings and art showings, but the cost can be a hurdle for them to be able to do that.
Excellent. So it's interesting that you mentioned this, because I was beginning to gaze at some of these other questions that you talk about hurdles, and as we talk about again this idea of equity, and making sure as many Chattanoogans as possible are connected to the city, the thriving of the city, and feel like they have a place here. So I have a couple of questions about inclusivity as it relates to disability. or different abilities. So there's a couple of questions in that realm. If you are elected mayor, and I think I think all of these things again relate to these are cultural questions, and we have a lot of artists that are often overlooked because of these other identities that are doing great work in the city. But perhaps we are not being conscious enough or having enough conversation. So this question, and I'll ask you these two close together here, so we can keep it flow. But if you're elected mayor, will you support the Mayor's Council on Disability in efforts to facilitate inclusion and awareness through engagement with different departments
Oh, yes.
and citizens? Okay. And so I'll ask you this as a follow-up to that and see if you
Okay.
can elaborate a little bit. So someone said that there's no mention of the quote unquote disabled culture in your platform of inclusivity and engagement. They say, as a woman with a disability who lives independently and under the affordable housing guidelines, they would like to know what you plan to do if elected to change the familiar narrative of segregation and dismissal of the disabled culture in government, safe housing, and the arts.
Well, I'm not for any kind of discrimination. If you're disabled, that I think government needs to take that into account, and I think organizations, they need to take that into account, and they need to accommodate where they can. We need to have ramps, in places where disabled people go. We need to have elevators available. And I would definitely be looking at that if I am elected to mayor. And but my mother, I had taken care of her for several years. She was handicapped, was in a wheelchair. So I've got firsthand knowledge and experience dealing with handicapped people. So I'm definitely on their side and would want to do everything I could to help their situation.
I would say too, to an earlier point, Mr. Cartwright, that you made in regards to the sidewalks being out of shape and out, the panels popping up in different areas. I think of that often in our city and how that affects our disabled.
Oh, definitely, absolutely.
About that because we those of us who are not don't have those same challenges and maybe have different, and so it's different hurdles on that. But I think that's definitely something to consider for our disabled in this community.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we have some broken panels of sidewalk out near Gateway Avenue that the panel of sidewalk is like 3 inches higher than the parallel panel. And for the life of me, I don't think a person in a wheelchair could negotiate that, could get up that sidewalk.
That also brings up another point of where cities are adopting like these Lime scooters and other type that have that can just be left or not. And I know we have scooters coming our way, but I think they're not as loose as like the Lime ones that can be just dropped anywhere. I think they do have docking stations, hopefully, because I think that's a concern as well for the disabled community is when those are dropped just anywhere. Folks aren't thinking about who's coming along next, who may not be able to pick it up or walk around it or whatever.
Yes.
But I think having more of that foresight and having folks who are familiar with those challenges on your team would help you to address some of these issues, and
yes.
And that there is a mayor's council for disability, I think, that would, definitely help you to serve that.
Right. Yes, yes.
Excellent. So transitioning again, we have a couple questions about the BFO process, and I know this has come up in a couple of other talks, probably most of them. And for those that might be unfamiliar, BFO stands for budgeting for outcomes. So there's a lot of, some folks might understand it as very simple. Some folks might understand it as very complicated. And that might be part of the issue. Differences in understanding, differences in approaches. So there are a couple of questions about just in general about your thoughts on the current BFO process with the city. And then someone also asks, is that something you think you would keep, or eliminate, or replace with something else?
Well, I think I would keep it.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to budget for outcomes, and we do have to hold to a budget, and so I would be open to cutting fat out of the budget where I could, streamline services, cut red tape to make government more user friendly, not less. But having said that, I would still want to do what I could to help the art community and the disabled. I wouldn't be cutting any type of service for those things. But I would have to, once I got into office, I'd have to look at the books and see what had been done.
Okay.
And, take it from there, see where I could add in places that needed it. And then cut where I can to help balance the budget.
So,
yeah.
okay. So more. So getting a little bit more specific for the particular, for the particular budgeting for outcomes process. Someone is asking. So you said that's something you would like to see remain. Someone's asking, how would you, or if you would, restructure the BFO process to make funds more attainable for nonprofits in our community? So we have plenty of nonprofits broadly, but a lot of the work in the arts and cultural community is being done by nonprofits like the one I work for, and there's on this call as well. So would you have any plans for restructuring or anything else that would make funds more attainable for nonprofits, or make the system more digestible?
Well, I would have to look at the particulars of the organization, what their manpower is, what their budget is, what they have to offer, and then look at what other groups have, and compare them, and hopefully everybody would be able to get an equal share of the pie. But until I'm in office and I actually see what the pie is, and then what is available, what would I really be able to give any concrete answers?
Understood.
This, that, or the other thing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Say a particular thing, and then 6 months later, somebody say, "Well, no, you said that."
Sure.
And you're not going to do it. Well.
Sure. No, that makes plenty. I mean, as someone running those, you sort of get stuck with kind of two options there. You can you can get into specifics and then get proven wrong, or so that makes sense to me. So we're getting close to time here, so I'm gonna kind of jump back up into some more to broader questions. Monica, I don't know how many more you think we have here before it's time to jump out.
I think go ahead and ask one more, and then I've got the last two questions on the list for Mr. Cartwright.
Okay, excellent. So thinking about so thinking about jumping back out, thinking about some like all of these ideas together, and getting to that high level, I think I'd just like to revisit in really simple terms, and I think this is a great question for that. Kind of summarizing all of this up, if you could kind of think about these things, and then thinking about your feelings about the art, the value that art has to the community, and the city's role in supporting it. Could you maybe describe broadly how those things work together? So your experience, its greater value, and then the city's role specifically as a government, the mayor as a social actor and as a civil servant, their role in supporting all of that together.
Well, I know art has been very important for me. It's lifted me up when I felt down, you know, just grabbing my uke or playing a keyboard and singing and practicing. It really gives a refreshment to the soul, is what I find, and I want to make that available for all people. Uh, you know. Students in schools. We need to keep band. We need to keep art in the schools. I think it's very important. I know several of my friends, they're into art or music, and it's been a great release for them. You know, art is that thing that you can't put on paper, but has a great benefit, I think. And so as mayor, I would definitely push for more art and do all those things that I could to increase that in the community. And I see it as only helping the community, lessening crime. You know, if your attention is diverted in a positive area, it's more than likely that it's not going to go to a negative area where you're going to be involved in gang warfare in the community and breaking store windows and looting and taking this, that, or the other thing, or doing other things you shouldn't do. I would accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. Does that make?
That sounds
Yeah.
that sounds like a good overarching plan.
About that somewhere.
Excellent. All right, so I'll pass it off to Monica now, and let her wrap up.
Thank you so much, Woodson. All right, sir, we just have a couple more questions for you and we'll let you go. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This next one refers to something you touched on earlier in your concerns and our response to COVID-19. The question is, how would you integrate the arts as a part of our city's response to the COVID-19 recovery? And when I say that, or I ask this question, you know, with remembering that the arts communities have been underserved and also have been serving the community during this time, but are also in recovery. But how would you integrate them as part of our city's response to recovery? You know, in helping our schools, our government, just our overall city response?
Well, I think that perhaps when classes are open, and we do have some students that are going back to school, and perhaps different art groups could become more involved in the schools. Perhaps voluntarily put artwork on display in the schools and talk about their art. And that would be a big way that you could motivate the students to look at art, and that can only help their mental health, I would say, mental health and spiritual health. And the artist, I think they can do more things on the internet and to try to get more dollars for themselves, and maybe we can have. Maybe it would still be safe to have some kind of like outdoor concerts in the city. People keeping a safe distance from one another, wearing a mask, and it would be safe, I think, if people would just follow the proper protocol. You know, it's so sad. A lot of what's happened didn't need to happen. If back in March, people would just had wore a mask and just followed the simple CDC guidelines, we wouldn't have had to close all these businesses down, you know, and our economy would have been much better. We probably would have had 1/4 the deaths from COVID. If our government officials, our police, if they just had taken this thing serious, we wouldn't be facing, the art community and others in our community wouldn't be facing this nightmare, the Stephen King nightmare that we're all going through.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on that. I do feel like, I know that there's a lot that we're learning from it, but I do feel like our response could have been better. But also
Yes.
with that, I think you touched on a very important point that you can push on further is that, in response, the arts are very much therapeutic. They do heal. And we are going to come out of this with a lot of PTSD and some mental health illness, that we need to address even more so than we were before. And I think there's various ways that you could integrate the arts, but also in another way that's definitely been talked about as of recent, the live entertainment industry has been pretty much shut down. To your point, a lot of folks having to find alternate revenue streams via live streaming and virtual, as we're doing today on Zoom. But, it'd be interesting to see if our city and state and federal leaders, recruited and put our live entertainment staff out there to help with this vaccination, because the live entertainment industry, and the arts build cities in a weekend for fun. They do that for festivals and everything else. So they could really take these vaccine exercises and hopefully get some people through. So it's just something to consider. I have one more question for you, sir. And that is,
Sure.
Why should the people who make up the local arts and culture sector vote for you?
Well, because I'm an artist myself, and I share their love of arts, and I would do all I could to further arts in Chattanooga.
Well, that was the right answer. That's what we want to hear. Well, I want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to participate this morning, whether you're an attendee or on the panel. I would like to share with everyone that we have merged. We were anticipating and ambitious, and we were planning on being able to interview all mayoral candidates as well as city council candidates. But to be honest, there are so many candidates. We have been able to work our way through all the mayoral candidates. We're going to be sending out a survey to all of our city council candidates, and we will have merged our town hall with the forum that's happening next Sunday. Let's see, not this Sunday, but February 7th. From 2 to 5 with WTCI, WUTC, Community Foundation of Greater Chattanooga, United Way, and the Chamber of Commerce, and many more. That will air Sunday, February 7th from 2 to 5 on WTCI. And Woodson, do you have any announcements that you would like to share with the attendees for RISE or yourself as an artist?
Yes, I would say big thing is be on the lookout. We've already done a round of this program, but it's our movement and art project that we've been working on, and it's about art that speaks to the times. As Nina Simone says, that's an artist's duty, is to speak to the times. And so we definitely see ourselves as following in her legacy. So be on the lookout. Coming into February, which is very soon, we will be having a call for all artists and all type of art to speak about identity. So who are you? I think last year has really made us all ask that question, like, who am I and who is everybody around me? So if you make anything, if you know anybody that makes anything, keep an eye out, and we'll be having all of that to you all very soon.
And will you do me a favor? Will you explain to the audience RISE, the acronym of RISE?
Yes, Responsive Initiatives for Social Empowerment. That is the acronym. Although most of the time we do say just the RISE.
I know, but I didn't want to mess up. I want to make sure everyone hears that from the rooftop. So
yes.
Thank you so much. Amy, do you have any announcements from Artsfield?
None that I haven't already mentioned at the beginning. Just want to thank Woodson and Juan for being with us today and spending some time with us to have a talk.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright. Do you have any announcements that you want to share?
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. If you want to support the arts, you should support me. And I need your help. I'm up against a millionaire. I'm up against heavy hitters. So any help that you can give, I would appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate that. We appreciate you. We definitely know what it is to have to fight for things, and we definitely appreciate that. So thank you to everyone. We have a wonderful Friday. Get out in some sunshine, and we will see you soon. Best of luck, sir.
Thank you. You have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
day.